All right. Hello. Welcome back. This is Colin Keeley.
And I'm Brent Sanders.
And we are the co-founders of Avocado, an audio publishing platform. So I'm trying to get more organized with this podcast. So this one, I actually sent over like a list of 5 possible topics we could talk about. I figure we just go down it. So I influenced you and you start taking Magic Mind.
So I'm easily influenced when it comes to drugs. I mean, so give me the story. How did Magic Mind find you?
So just Twitter. I'm sure they're just looking at Twitter and trying to find people with over 10,000 followers. And they DM'd me saying, hey, would you like this? And we'd love if you posted an honest review after you tried it. So it's like, yeah, sure, whatever. It's like $5 a pop. And they sent me probably 30 of them. And so, yeah, I tried it. I like it. I am kind of a big fan of trying all these different nootropics. And I have a bit of like a controlled setting with COVID where I know there's like zero variability to my day. So I've tried Magic Mind and I enjoy it. I probably drink too much coffee, so I'm trying to wean myself off of that a little bit. And I bought Qualia Mind, which is what people used to use before Magic Mind. They seem very similar, but it's like you have to consume 7 of these kind of fishy tasting pills. And Magic Mind is just like a little grass shot, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a whole new category as well. So I think you just sent me like, hey, check this out. These guys reached out to me. I love this kind of stuff. So I was on the bandwagon when MCT oil was really popular, or it was gaining popularity, like the bulletproof coffee craze. I never really got into the bulletproof coffee per se, but I'm a big coffee drinker, would normally drink like 4 to 5 cups a day, 3 in the morning and then maybe 2 in the afternoon. And I would say like the MCT oil thing that worked really well. It was like this clean energy. You didn't have the crash from coffee, but it would just wreck my stomach. And that tends to be the downside to a lot of these I don't know what to call them, performance enhancing, they're not FDA approved. We don't know if they actually work. It's possible that there's a lot of placebo in them. Although I did feel
nootropics
different.
Is the term for like improving cognition.
Yeah. Great. Nootropics. And then there's another category which we can talk about, which is euphorics. I don't know if Kin, the drink, coined that, but that was like a whole, I've never tried it, and it is its own brand, and it's very like DTC looking in the sense that everything's very well designed, but also sells for like $50 a case, or again, I don't even know how many come in there, but.
So I've done Kin. Have you tried it? You just said you haven't, right?
I have not, but I've heard it's terrible. I heard it tastes terrible, but that's purely from one person's opinion. What did you think?
It doesn't taste good. It's a little cough syrupy, and then it is very potent. Like I just had one glass and it was like, this is probably bullshit, right? Placebo. It is definitely not placebo. It really kind of knocked me out. And it's supposed to, I don't know if this is foo-foo to some extent, but like adapt you to your setting. So if everyone's drinking and you have Kin, you should be energetic. If you have it on the couch, which is what I did, it was definitely a sedative. It just kind of completely knocks you out after just one glass.
Yeah. So under the layer, so nootropics are a category of drugs, right? So it's like, I think tobacco and caffeine could they be considered a nootropic?
I would probably say so. I'm trying to think.
Well, either way, going back to the Magic one, I bought a case just for fun, and they were really nice. They were caught up in all the USPS debacle over the holiday, so I ordered it probably right around the week of Christmas, and I got it a week or 2 later, and they were super nice about giving me an update. So I try it, and it was great. It was like I like that they have you try it with, be sure to try it with your coffee or your caffeine in the morning. But it did have an effect, and it didn't wreck my stomach. So I'm definitely a supporter. I'm going to keep trying it, keep using it. I would say, again, I tried MCT oil. That was great, but destroyed me. And then I tried Alpha Brain, which is, I think, a similar type of concoction. Different. I think it's based in different things, but it's a lot of like the same. Like we're going to mix a bunch of, I think, vitamin B, and then a handful of other things, and it's this cocktail, and that would wreck my stomach as well. So I had to totally stop doing that. But I'm a fan. The Magic Mind, it tastes kind of gnarly, but it's just a shot, And I think after the third one, I started kind of craving it. It has this like very citrusy, mushroomy, earthy flavor,
Mm.
but you just kind of, shoot it and chase it with some coffee. And then I got a lot more out of it. And so I think the thing that strikes me with all this stuff is like, are we all just trying to get like light meth buzzes, right? Is that like the thing that, because it's funny, and I don't want to throw my dad on the bus, but he's in his 70s and he was in college, or he was studying in the 60s, and he was just like, yeah, we used to take uppers all the time. We had a test and we would just study for days, and it was like, what, like, are you, which I think essentially was some form of methamphetamine. It was just really, really common in the 60s for students, truckers, all sorts of people to, and I think it was a lot more normalized to take sort of study drugs. And obviously that evolved in its own way and it became much more taboo. But I feel like, is that what we're trying to find, like a healthy, obviously, I think if you take meth, it has a pretty negative impact on your health. So it's like we're trying to find these natural versions that get you sort of closer to that peak state. And so I'm obviously, some of these drugs that can be really powerful and dangerous. And I do think when I looked into nootropics, sorry to rant on here, but there's one, and I might be saying this wrong, it's modafinil,
Mm-hmm.
but it's by its trade name, which is Provigil, which is like, I think like a fighter pilot drug. They give them to you, if you're going to run an all night mission or you're going to be up for 12 hours, they'll give you something like that. So it's like, this stuff is, I think, still can be pretty powerful. And I do know that Provigil is like a Schedule 4 drug.
Yeah, so this is, I didn't really prepare for this, but I did read this book a long time ago called Daily Rituals, How Artists Work. And it goes through like many of the most creative people in history. And tons of them had substance abuse. I don't know if issues or habits is probably more accurate. And a lot of them did take some variation of an upper. And then many of them took a downer to counteract that stuff. And they're actually most productive when they weren't, doing heavy drugs. So they would do all this stuff, and probably artists are more drawn to it than others. And then they go off it for like a month. And that's actually when they're generally most productive.
Wow.
But it was a fun little book. It's like every little, sequence that people do is only like 2 pages. So you pick it up, you read a little bit, you put it down. But
I'm fascinated by this. I mean, I've looked into, once you start with caffeine, I feel like that is really the gateway drug. It's like once you start kind of feeling that rush from the caffeine and you get this like euphoric feeling and you're more productive. And now for me, it's like, I don't really feel that. It just kind of like gets me back to normal after, as I always complain about on the podcast, is, with an 18-month-old and we're just getting out of the woods with sleep. It's like, that was my lifeline, is like getting coffee in the morning after, 4 to 6 hours of sleep in a night is like the only way I could return to normal. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs talk about it because it is taboo. But I mean, obviously there is more of a community around this like microdosing thing. I think there's a lot of people that I've heard anecdotally that, THC affects them or CBD affects them in different ways. And I don't know, have you tried Feels, the CBD service that, has a flight that allows you to, they have like a good, better, best dosage that they kind of recommend. And they send them out as like a $20, try each one of them once. Have you tried that at all?
I haven't. That seems like a cool gift. I'll look into that. I've had a bunch of the CBD drinks. Recess is probably the best branded one. And then Mars, or something like Mars, is a local Chicago like distillery that's producing some that I had that this week. Actually, I enjoy it. Like, it's kind of, if you're trying not to drink at night, but it's like a nice little cocktail, you feel a nice little calm. It doesn't impact your sleep. Actually, I've noticed my heart rate variability is significantly better. So higher is better for that. And with an Oura Ring, you could test it, and it seems to improve your sleep at night if you take it early enough, because you don't want liquid too close before bed.
Sure. Yeah, you might like the Feels thing. So they have their heaviest dose, which they recommend for kind of before bedtime. And it's one of those, I forget the name for what the technique is called, but it's, you basically have a tincture of it, and it's an oil that sits under your tongue for 30 seconds. And it tastes kind of gross, but, it's just a small amount. So you don't have to drink a whole 12-ounce can or something. But yeah, I do feel like there's always this drive to get back into that flow state. And I think to your point around the book you're reading, it's like the best way to get there's probably naturally, but I think we all get kind of wired and rewired in different ways that makes that even harder. It's like good sleep, working out and a strong diet, like that should work. But a lot of people, struggle with that. Even myself, like I can't control my sleep sometimes, and I can only go to bed so early, and things happen. I have a little one who sometimes loves to get up at 3 a.m. and want to party, and it's like you just can't shut it off. So you can see why you would want to reach for some sort of synthetic way of getting you into that state. Or I shouldn't even say synthetic, because I do think a lot of these things are all natural ingredients, but by putting something from the outside world in your body. But I don't know, I'm a fan. I'm going to continue to experiment, and I think if nothing else, I don't see myself stopping my caffeine intake anytime soon. And if they come up with something new, I guess the question to you is like, would you ever, you're down with the Magic Mind and these nootropics, would you ever, if somebody came out with a pill, like a pharmaceutical that needed to be prescribed but was deemed safe, would you ever try that?
100%. Yeah.
the limitless
safe,
drug.
No question, I would do it. So my brother's actually super into this. He's got a Vyvanse script, Adderall script, and he actually he shouldn't be doing this, but making pills in his basement, and he's like just a little pill maker. So I don't take any of the stuff that he makes, but definitely I enjoy testing it as long as it is safe.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that for me, I've taken Adderall or something, once or twice, and I just turn into an asshole. Like I really, get a really short temper, and I have to steer clear of that stuff. It's weird. It's like I can drink, I can, take any sorts of drugs, and I'm usually, I'm fine. But that one, for some reason, just my temper, like I just get so frustrated. So I steer clear of that one from just purely like a mood stabilization perspective. But sure, would it be nice to be able to get more done in a day? Absolutely. But yeah, everything seems to come with some sort of trade-off. But I guess that's where some of this more natural stuff, it's a little more tame, and it's not gonna, the Magic Mind didn't make me an asshole. So that's the good news.
I don't think there is a trade-off with Magic Mind or some of these other nootropics. Like Adderall, there certainly is. You become more irritable, you have more anxiety, like you don't eat as much. There's a lot of downsides to Adderall, but I don't really see any downsides with Magic Mind or any one of these. My next test for this week is I bought some matcha. I want to see if matcha has a similar effect by itself, or if everything else in Magic Mind is actually needed to be in there, like lion's mane and all that other stuff that they have.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, matcha's delicious. So we were going to talk about one thing that we're kind of going through with this other business besides avocado is Formulated, the automation company. And as we're growing that, one thing that I've been looking at is like, how do we include people? How do we include more people at an early stage? So we formed the business. We have 4 total sort of partners and founders, I would call them. And so we've done that much, and like looking at and thinking through as we meet people that are like subject matter experts or people that we want to be attached to the business, but like, there's not, we're not hiring people per se, but like, what are some good strategies for including more people in your startup, essentially? So on that note, I was curious, like, do you have any experience with, and I know you had your other startup, did you have any advisors or anybody that you brought on?
So I have informal advisors, which I think are valuable, where it's just like other CEOs that are ahead of you, where you could bounce ideas off and ask for feedback. I think advisors that get equity but don't put in money are mostly bullshit and somewhat like predatory in like these secondary or tertiary locations for startups. I think this is why we do the podcast. This is why I tweet. It's like just building in public. People like, rooting for other people. They like following your story. And I think that is probably the easiest and best way to do it at scale, where you get other people involved and like cheering you on and trying to be helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in the case of Formulated, like I found that there are these sort of subject matter experts and people that have deep networks that can make introductions. And sure, they probably could do that for free and just kind of out of the kindness of their heart, but also want to like tie them in and get them a little bit more invested. And it's like the thing I'm thinking about, it's like somebody who's almost, it wouldn't be a full-time role. So it's almost like a part-time or fractional. I don't even know if it would be like a mix between a strategy and salesperson, but it's like, how do we bring somebody onto the team, give them some equity? So like part of it would be maybe advisorship. And when I think of advisorship, I think, I think there's some advisors that it's a couple hours a month. And I think there's some advisors that it's a couple hours a week. Actually, I don't even know what that is. So like, what's the next step up past advisor? It's like board member is too deep, and assuming they're not putting money in, but like it's early stage enough, you want to give them some sort of like they would almost participate on a project, put in some work, but in lieu of cash get some sort of equity compensation over a long period of time. And I'm wondering, it seems like there are some interesting ways that you could do this, but I'm not sure like what's commonplace.
I mean, I think cash is probably the best way to compensate these people.
Yeah.
Equity's like, assuming the business does well and takes off, equity would be the most expensive way you could compensate someone.
Sure. I do like, we're, as we do with most of the businesses that we start, we use the ORIC guide, or another way of putting it is using like Stripe Atlas to form up the company. So it's, the founders all have 4-year vest with a 1-year cliff, and it's like normal startup kind of recommended terms. And so, yeah, I'm wondering, like, does it make sense for if somebody's hanging around and they're useful and add a lot of value for a certain period of time, does that make sense to earn into the company? And then as it grows, I mean, we're at such an early stage with it where it's there's a little bit of revenue, but it's not like enough to hire this person or really anybody full time until some bigger projects start hitting. So it's like crafting different ways to incentivize someone to kind of like push on the momentum, because like that's where the business is. It's like the flywheel is stopped, it's just started, and this is the hard part. It's like getting personal intros and putting your reputation on the line a little bit, and making a recommendation of, hey, you guys should try this brand new company that is only has a handful of projects under its belt, but look at the founders. They're senior, they have a great track record. Yeah, I wonder if there's an interesting way to mix equity, cash, also in the idea of like, hey, once we hit a certain point, you could come on as an employee. So I wonder if that's more so the right way to structure it, where it's like, hey, it's not a founder spot, but it is sort of somewhere in between, where you can come on as an early stage employee in, let's say, 6 months or 3 months, whatever that time is.
I think we're going to see more of this. What you're basically describing is like a part-time employee, and in a remote world where you're not required to be glued to your desk for like 8 to 10 hours a day, you could have multiple jobs and like you could do all of them well. And so I think it would make sense to hire someone for 10 hours a week that's senior, and you can't pay them, I don't know, if they want to make 400,000, you can pay them 100,000 for working, quarter of the time.
Yeah.
And they could do really good work and be really impactful, and they get, equity and cash for the time they're putting in.
I dig it. It's funny now that you say that. There are also people in this COVID time, and there are a couple that I know more so on like the web development and design front, that there are a handful of people that I know that have 2 full-time jobs that somehow these other businesses don't know that they do. And I don't know how they do it. I think the only way to do it is just be really good at boundaries. It's like, again, if somebody calls an all hands meeting, it's really hard to say, oh, I can't make that. Or how do you get out of one meeting or another? But I agree that the fractional employee hopefully is the thing of the future, because I think people really crave variety, and there are certain roles that like you just don't, for certain stages of companies, you don't really need to be 40 hours all in all week. It's like just coming in for, I think of like being able to set the ball, like think of a volleyball game, being able to set up the ball for someone else to spike it. It really doesn't happen every single time. It's like, from here and there, having like that extra boost is of huge value.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you want to cover on our list that jumped out at you?
I feel like the cold email pitch has been really interesting. So we've been talking about the cold emails that we've been sending out. This week we just started back up. So reaching out to people after the holidays and you changed the pitch. So we did a bunch of writing. We had a bunch of different headlines, and the one that seems to be winning is like so much more passive. And we've gotten a couple of responses. I mean, other than take me off your list. But like one person sent like a wonderful, like very thoughtful response. And so what was the change?
So I initially was pitching, like, here's how we can help you, right? We'll be your automation arm, and we're pitching logistics companies. And we're getting no responses. Some of that was that we set it up a little oddly with SendGrid and Google, and I didn't realize it wasn't connected because it was connected in a different way. So I had to fix that because it's really frustrating. We get no responses, but now we have some. And so that pitch of like, hey, I'm trying to sell you something, let's hop on a call. It's a big ask, and it's really hard to figure out from the outside whether this is useful to that specific company. And so I changed it to, hey, I'm the founder of this, so it kind of gives you credibility. You're an early stage company, people want to root for you. And I'm thinking of doing this. And I think you could be in the target market, but honestly, I don't really know. Is this something that would be interesting to you? And it's a very small ask. I think people want to be helpful, and that's proven pretty fruitful where people at least engaged. It doesn't look like a cold email or like a cold email at scale, which it is. I mean, we're blasting these out every day to quite a few people. But I feel really good about it. It's all written very in like a human way. Like it sounds like you, although I wrote it.
Yeah.
And people seem to enjoy it.
It's definitely more my style too. I'm not a hard selling salesperson. So it's like, I'm very much more of like a cooperative sales kind of, and frankly, I'm more used to in my prior careers, or my prior businesses, people coming to me. That's really how my first two companies started. It was there was just such high demand, and people would come to me, and I was really enjoyed that position of like, oh yeah, we get 2 or 3 inbounds a week, and we can pick and choose what we want to do. But the problem with that is that changes, the market will shift, and you don't really control your pipeline. So this has been really encouraging to start getting some responses, and also like setting the tone where it's like they are doing me a favor, but I think, as you said, you're kind of setting them up to feel good about it. And then it's more of a consultative sale. I think that now, and the people that have responded with real reasons why they wouldn't or would use something. And it's like, we're thinking through it together. We're in this sort of like, I'm in the driver's seat, they're in the passenger seat, and like kind of having a conversation around a topic. But I feel like that can easily transition. I have an easier path to transition to it. Like, hey, I've been thinking about what you sent. What do you think of this? And continuing the conversation, and then potentially leading them to a conclusion, right? So then they have the idea of like, hey, well, maybe we could engage. Maybe this is interesting. Maybe there is a solution here. So I'm pretty excited about it. I'm actually, I'm excited to continue sending out these emails and seeing who was able to respond.
Yeah. So I was talking to Josh. He had a different perspective. So it's basically send 25-ish a day for a week, and then Monday through Friday, and then nothing really on the weekends. And then the next week send 50-ish a day. And then you never want empty days. So you always have to have a big list, because you never want to send 0 emails. But after those 2 weeks, he basically said you could be off to the races. You could send 500 a day, which I've never actually scaled it to that point before. But I thought that was super interesting, is that there's no high end. You could just keep going and going.
Well, we'll have to work on our list building, because we do have a lot of leads, but only in the sense of, if we're sending 50 a day. If we're sending 500 a day, we'll go through that in a couple days.
Yeah, and it may be so many conversations that like you'd have to hire someone to handle them all.
That's what I've been waiting for all week, so I'm ready. Put me in, coach.
Yeah, hopefully next week. 50 a day, then like that's plenty. And then it's just a numbers game. Like we're starting to see like 5 to 10% response rates and 50% open rates. Like that gets to volume pretty quickly.
Excellent. Well, cool. Yeah, I think that's probably about it. Did you want to cover anything else?
Just this last thing. Did you ever get on Clubhouse? There was a crazy discussion last night.
I didn't. My wife is pushing me to go on a social media cleanse. So
Oh,
she's
okay.
like, I wake up every morning and she's like, you wake up every morning and doom scroll, which is pretty accurate. I grab my phone, I read top headlines, and then I hop on Twitter, and it's just like outrage, and it does put me in a pretty bad mindset. So this week I've been off of Twitter, off of the news. I mean, I do catch up with the news eventually, but like it's made a pretty positive impact other than, physically being in a different location. I think I might stick with it for a while. Not
That's
great for
good.
my networking, but I do want to know the dirt. What's the tea? You got to spill it.
So I mute every like thing that could get me pissed off on Twitter for the most part. So it's more like tech focused stuff. But last night, all these San Francisco guys, like most of the Founders Fund folks, just had a talk on like what the future of San Francisco is and, how can we improve. And they're basically hating on the DA, who's like kind of famous for not punishing anyone that steals anything below $1,000. So Walgreens are just like completely ransacked at all times. I think home burglaries are up like 50% this year, and 30% of the people are gone in San Francisco. So like the incidence rate is just super, super high. But anyway, they're all bashing him, and then he joined Clubhouse. So it was
Nice.
amazing. It was probably like an hour of him, defending his record and them kind of trying to attack. And I don't know that much about this guy, but he is extraordinarily good at debating. So it's like all these, super smart tech folks, but not prepared whatsoever to go into like a real political debate with a polished politician. So they kept trying to, he's very slippery and he's very prepared with his talking points. And so they like couldn't pin him down. It was awesome. And then Balaji, something like that. He was the CTO of Coinbase and a GP at Andreessen joined. And then he was like, he's coming in firing. And so he was trying to pin this guy down with specifics. And then the guy left within like 5 minutes.
Oh no.
So they started getting heated. But this is like the best social media experience I've probably had in like, I don't know, 10 years. It was just such a fascinating call to like be a part of. And now it's gone. Like there's no recording of it because Clubhouse doesn't allow it. I mean, maybe someone figured out a way, but it's just, I think there are 3,000 people at the peak listening on this like pretty awesome conversation.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, this is a trend you're seeing in a lot of cities. Chicago has had a lot of the same things under Kim Fox, which is it's hotly debated where, hey, the bail amounts are incredibly low. I'm not trying to get into that conversation, but it is, and I don't know what his points were, but I do see, and this is my curse, which is why I'm not good at Twitter, is I do see both sides of it, where it's like there is no real repercussion for a lot of low hanging criminality, I guess, which I wouldn't even consider. One of the things we're seeing in Chicago, it's really bad, the carjackings. It's like people just getting, whacked in the head with a, pistol whipped, and they take your car. And unfortunately, these people are usually getting released. But the point that I do see is that the inequity in bond, and I do believe that needs to be addressed. I don't think it's going well. And this is like anything in politics. It whips around the extremes and hopefully kind of ends up in the middle somewhere where it actually can be fixed. But these are really tough problems. And I don't feel like I would have a hard time hearing a bunch of complaints from tech bros, but not to call everybody a tech bro, but to call everybody a tech bro. I mean, it's like, it's so easy to kind of sit in a position where, from sort of an armchair quarterback position and say, this is how things should be done. And then realize when you step into a role like the DA does, and you have to kind of serve the entire population, your limits to your decisions and the scope of your decisions are much more difficult.
Yeah. So he basically took no responsibility and like threw everyone else under the bus, like the government, the police. And then, but he had a lot of really good points of like, this is a crazy bureaucracy that's super complicated. Like they still use faxes and all their data is on paper and they can't, possibly analyze anything. They have a mainframe, like an actual mainframe that they still use. That's like 20 plus years old and they can't get data off of it. But he's very, very polished and very good at this, but he actually had some good points on like, this is a really hard problem. Like, I don't think he's probably trying to solve it in the right way that many people would agree with, but he's definitely not an idiot. He's not trying it. Like he is trying.
Yeah, his wiki page, Chesa Budin, is that his name? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's Chessa. It's an odd name.
Chesa. Yeah. Yeah, so his wiki page is, I don't know how accurate it is, but it makes it sound like he comes from a very strict Marxist family. It says Boudin descends from a long left-wing lineage. His great and grand uncle Louis Boudin was a Marxist theoretician and author of a 2-volume history of the Supreme Court's influence on American government, and his grandfather was also an attorney who represented Fidel Castro and Paul Robeson. So it's like, I don't know how much that affects or what, but apparently his parents, he grew up in Chicago, his parents were part of the Weather Underground, which I believe was a very militant, radical left-wing militant organization in the 60s.
Yes, I think they went to prison for killing someone.
Oh, geez, yeah. This is part of this is an interesting part of, as we look at the tumult right now, and you're like, oh, this is so unprecedented. It's like actually not super unprecedented. This has been going on. It's just, you know, the 60s and 70s were starting to look very similar right now.
Yeah, I'm not going to vote for him, but he is very, very good at what he does. I think he's going to have a much larger national presence soon.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, that's cool. That's a great thing for Clubhouse. I mean, I think those are the types of discussions that I'd love to hear about versus, you know, some of the, again, I haven't really been on Clubhouse, but you hear there's also just like some people going on, you know, racist or anti-Semitic rants. So hopefully there's more conversation and discourse like that, where it's, even if it gets heated, it's like, that's where social media works versus, you know, talking about what also happened this last week, Parler getting shut down, which there's also hilarious. This was the last thing I did read on Twitter, was there's a hilarious thread on technically kind of hearing about how how Parler imploded due to just a lack of technical understanding. It's they basically ran out of rows in their database because they didn't know there was a maximum number of rows. So anyways, it's good for there to be this back and forth. I think it's really important, and hopefully people don't, you know, go off, and we'll see what happens with social media in the next, I think next year, we're going to see some major changes.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's good. On that note, take care.
On that note, thanks for listening.